We continue in Sefer Shoftim. Yesterday we got up through Pasuk Chaf Ches. We ended off with Gidon's refusal to become the king, whatever that really means. And he did ask everyone to give him one nose ring out of gold, and from that he made this ephod, he made this belt. And in Pasuk Chav Zayin it said, he set this belt up in his city in Ophrah, and the Jews strayed after it. And it was for Gidon and his family for a stumbling block. So we discussed how he felt that it should be that his tribe of Menashe should have some kind of a spiritual item that people could relate to, but unfortunately it didn't work out the way he wanted it to. Now it's interesting, in the book of Koheles it says V'chochmas hamiskein bezuya. It means a poor man's wisdom is despised. A poor man's wisdom is despised, meaning a person doesn't really have a lot of wisdom. So who's this? It says Zaken Shu Yoshev Umaski Midvar. This is a Zaken, an older person, who sits and becomes poor with his words. Okay, meaning to say he doesn't really even keep what he himself says others should keep.
Well, he doesn't talk.
And no, he doesn't keep what he tells others to keep. That becomes the poor man's wisdom. So and they apply this to Gidon. Because it says Gidon made an ephod, and he's the shofet. Well, look what you caused your own problems. Now, even though from the commentaries it seemed that nobody really worshipped this as an idol until after he died, but again, in other words, when people came to Ophrah and Gidon saw them coming praying for sick people, he thought that they were looking at it was reminding them of Hashem, and they were davening to Hashem, remembering all the miracles that Hashem did for them. But the truth of the matter is, no, that's not so. That they were going back to their old-fashioned thoughts of what idol worship was, and Gidon wasn't aware of that. It's interesting, by every other shofet, it will say that the person was a shofet for X amount of time. Let's give the last example, Tvorah. Second, we'll get into Dalet. It's not coming right away over here. But generally speaking, it says how long there was the shvita, how long the person.
It said we just deducted that from the amount of time she after the victory.
Right, but it mentions that the person was a shofet. All right. But by here it doesn't mention him being a shofet. It never uses the word shofet over him.
So who decided he was one?
The Navi is telling us, listen, people accepted him, but did he act like a shofet? Did he lead the people like a shofet? Did he try to, encourage the people to learn Torah? Did he bring a resurgence in Yiddishkeit? So we don't see it's mentioned over here. He made this ephod, and that's it. And it says it became a stumbling block for him and his family. It says that the land was quiet for 40 years, but it doesn't use the expression that he was a shofet, right? Meaning to say that he never really lived up to what a shofet should live up to. So the question is, he didn't see the great dangers that were involved in what he did to the Jewish people. With trying to make things better, he made things worse. So the question has to be asked, so what caused him to not see the danger that was happening over there, and that allowed things to turn out to be so poorly? And it's interesting, that medrash that we quoted yesterday that said that the ephod did not have the name of Menashe, and he made this belt as a substitute. So the medrash ends off, he says, since this tribe was not in the ephod, he didn't have the mazel, he didn't have the good fortune that comes with this ephod and with the tikkun that the ephod brings, the correction that the ephod brings. So it seems that him and his tribe didn't really have that spiritual strength that comes from the aphod's choshen as the other ones did, and therefore he stumbled. In other words, he was charting in territory that was out of his league. To get involved in all this spiritual stuff, for whatever reason, which will remain an enigma, this tribe of Menashe just didn't have all the spiritual strength like the other tribes had. Now maybe it could be developed over time, and this could have been their challenge, but they didn't have that capability. So therefore, Gidon, how does he end up making this mistake? You can say on a very simple level, he felt bad for his tribe, and he had a certain amount of bias, and he wanted his tribe to be spiritually up there like the other ones. And his bias did not clarify for him that, yeah, that's fine, but certain things you just do not do. You don't try to say, well, all the Jews got the ephod, we have our own ephod. And you'll see this will become this can create great problems. Right? And that's why they ultimately failed. And that's what we ended off yesterday saying,
The connection between a Novi or a Shofet is with Hashem. So obviously Hashem just didn't bother with him anymore, because that's where he found himself at the stage. Before that, Hashem told him what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and he did it. Now suddenly he's left alone, and he's left to his own means, as it were, and so the background was no good.
Hashem starts a person off, and then they have to continue on their own. He was given enough help, and then his job would then be to move things further along, and if he doesn't know...
That's it. Nobody bothered with him anymore.
Okay, so listen, people have free will choice. Hashem can't be over you every second of your life and keep smacking you every time you make a mistake. He was. It's not clear if he was a Navi. We're not clear from all the different Meforshim. Either the messages came through a Navi or through a Malach. And it doesn't matter if you're a Navi. Not always for the rest of your life you're a Navi. Hashem comes to you. He gives you the promise. He gives you the help. And now you got to take off on your own. Even with Yaakov. Yaakov got the dream of the ladder from Hashem, and then for 20 years Hashem signed off. Now you're on your own in Lavan's place. I ain't talking to you for 20 years. He was a Navi. But Hashem says, now you're in an unholy place. You don't get prophecy outside of Eretz Yisrael. So for Yaakov, for 20 years you're on your own. I'll come back. I'll meet you in 20 years. Let me know what happened. So he had to make it happen on his own. Right? So it's not like Hashem's with you every single second, and now you know everything all the time. That's not how it works. Hashem gives you this one inspiration. He says, I'm with you. You can go and do what you have to do. And now you have to do some on your own. And he fails to do that on his own. Right? So it's again he's a very tragic figure, as opposed to some others that we have. We don't find this by Hasnil ben Kenaz. You don't find this by Ehud ben Gera. You don't find this by Devorah and Baruch. You don't find this. It's really, and that's why he's not really. He had the opportunity. He had lived up to his promise. He would have been that great shofet, but he didn't, and and we'll see as we go into the next chapter what tremendous aggravation happens from all this. We will see. But the main lesson that we ended off yesterday's class with is that changes that we make to help the Jewish people that have no basis in rabbinic literature are meaningless. And made-up things have no validity. Right? So if Ephraim is destined to represent Yosef on the stone, if that's what it was, so making a different stone from Menashe is not going to succeed. That's all. And you have to accept it. And even though you don't like it, and you say, I don't understand, it's not fair, so Hashem says, fine, but that's the way I want it for now. Play the way I want it. Who's to say that things wouldn't have changed? Who's to say? I mean, listen, so you're going to say, what was his options? He should have maybe deferred to Ephraim. He could have said, I'm not really the king, so let us all turn to my older brother Ephraim, who is on the Choshen. He has more spiritual strength than me. I put all my efforts and backing into the younger brother. And maybe that's the thing he should have done. And if he would have done that, then he may have deserved that God would say, we're going to make some changes now to the ephod, and we're going to put your name in there. There are things but when the person saw, I'm spiritually behind, so I've got to do other things You know, it just doesn't cut it. Doesn't cut it. You know, the whole women's rights thing, right? I'm saying, how come women can't put a tallis on? How come women can't put a tefillin on? Hashem says, you don't need it. No, I think we're going to do it. That's not going to make one lady more observant. Not one. Maybe they're going to be less observant. It becomes its own avodah zarah. If God said you're not supposed to put tallis and tefillin, you don't put tallis and tefillin on. Finished. And you can do it all day long. It isn't going to help. So you got to be really careful. You can't doing new things that aren't part of the tradition. It's probably going to fail because there's a reason why it wasn't part of the tradition. Doesn't mean to say that sometimes we do, but generally speaking, you can't. It's not based in halacha, so it's not going to succeed. So here's a good example. It did not succeed. Did not succeed at all. Okay, so now let's continue. Chavtes. So now we kind of see the big anticlimax now. Chafetz, Vayelach Yerubbaal ben Yoash, Vayeshev bebeso. So Yerubbaal, the son of Yoash, he now goes and sits back, and goes back to his house to sit down. In other words, just live there. In other words, as the Metzudas David explains, he didn't work very hard in his leadership of the people. He went back to his house to be in rest. And we'll see in the next pasuk what happens because a man with a lot of free time in his hands and doesn't take on the responsibility of leadership that was afforded to him, what comes out of that. Now, the Malbim says, though, gives a little bit, explaining why he did that. Malbim asks, because there weren't any more wars. In other words, Gidon felt his whole purpose of being a leader was to fight the wars for the Jews. So guess what? There was no wars. I don't have anything to do. That was the biggest mistake. You had to fight the biggest wars. The wars of Torah had to be fought now. And he didn't fight the wars of Torah. He says, okay, everything's fine. Again, he never really wanted to be a leader. He was a humble guy. That's good. And so he wins these wars, and he should have understood from Hashem, there's more wars to fight. And really, he could have gone to places and insisted you guys start learning Torah, and if not, there's going to be consequences. But he doesn't do that. So he kind of just lays back. Now it's interesting, the contrast. He was being called now Yerubbaal. Yerubbaal, that was a very esteemed title. Yerubbaal, the one who fought the Baal. So the great Yerubbaal, what did he do? He did nothing. He just sat at home. At the end of the day, he was just a Ben Yoash, the son of the idol worshiper. He went back to his house. Right? Nothing great continued from him. The whole idea is, you're supposed to get out of your house. Remember, whenever it says Vayeshev, that's a killer word. You see the word Vayeshev, you're in trouble. How did this week's parsha start? Vayeshev Yaakov Beersheva. Yaakov lived in Beersheba, but it was Be'eretz Mugurei Aviv, in the land of the sojourning of his father. Yaakov said, "Listen, I'm already. How old is he? 99 years old. He said, I already did my thing for king and country. I've done enough for the Jewish people. Now, can I take it easy? Can I rest now? Can I just be at home and work on my own spirituality and just take it? It's time for retirement." So, and whenever, that's what we said. That's what we've been saying in Shabbos a couple of weeks ago. You never rest. It's enough that tzaddikim are going to get the reward in the Olam Haba. They're going to have beautiful Olam Haba. They want to have it over here too. No. And therefore, and then, and because of that, the whole calamity of Yosef comes up. There's no such thing as taking it easy in Yiddishkeit. There's no such thing. This whole idea of relaxing, and it's so against what it means to be a human being. So whenever you see the word Vayeshev, that's like, lahavdol. There used to be an expression, if a sportsman was good, like a football team was good, a player was good, so there's a magazine called Sports Illustrated, so there was a rule, whenever a guy made it to the top and his picture was on Sports Illustrated, that was like the death blow. Yeah. That means he'd go down after that. World champion, this and that, then you don't hear from the guy again. You wouldn't see the same guy in the cover 2 years later, that he's still the same champion. It's the kiss of death. So Vayeshev, you want a Vayeshev? You want to sit? Kiss of death. Look, everywhere you're going to find Vayeshev. It says when they were in the desert, it says Vayeshev. At the end of the Yeshev, they said Beshitim and Shitim, and then they got into all that immorality. It says it's okay. It says right at the end of Parshas Balak. It says Vayeshev. They sat in Shittim. Man, I don't got to struggle anymore. Don't let you Vayeshev. I'm sitting. Everything's okay. Everything's fine. I've plateaued. Once you plateau, you're in big trouble. And that's what he wants. He wants to plateau now. Vayeshev, take it easy. So whenever you do that, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. It has to be Be'eretz Megorei Aviv, where like his fathers were just passing through. I don't stay in this place. This isn't the main thing, but he wanted to sit in this place of not taking responsibility, not leading. So now, what does the guy do? He's got all this time on his hand. Let's go on to Pasuk Lamed. So Gidon had he sired 70 children who came from him. Kinashim Rabos, because he had a lot of wives. A lot of free time, a lot of wives, a lot of kids. He definitely fulfilled the mitzvah of being fruitful and multiplying. But we'll see the mitzvah backfires on him. And then for all, so in other words, a lot of free time, so you get involved in more base activities. Okay. So instead of building up the Jewish people, he just built up his own family. Lamed Aleph, Upiladsho, and then he had a concubine. Asher b'Shchem, which was in Shechem. Yoldalo gam hi ben. And she also gave birth to a son for him. Vayosem es Shemo Avimelech. And she placed his name as Avimelech. So, why did he have a Pelegish in Shechem? What's he doing? He doesn't live there. He lives in Shechem is in Ephraim's territory, right? That's where Yosef HaTzadik is buried, in Shechem. So, but he's living in the tribe of Menashe. So so what's he doing over there? So it could very well be that, and if you really look, the other Shoftim, they all kind of had residences in Ephraim. You find Yoshua was from Ephraim, and he was buried there. Dvorah had place in Ephraim. So it seems that all the leaders, they would come to Ephraim. That was the place where leaders were. So therefore, he wanted to have a residence there as well. And it was his, his presidential suite, his presidential retreat was in Shechem, because that's where the other leaders were. So he kind of asserted himself over there. And it's interesting. He named the kid Avimelech. What does Avimelech mean? My father, the king. So in other words, so he didn't totally reject the Malchus. He didn't totally reject being the king. He kind of held on a little bit to it, and we'll see that becomes a big problem. Listen, if you're not interested at all, you're not interested at all. So go back and don't get involved at all. But up a little bit, even though it's not for me, this and that, but I really wish maybe I would have had it, but I don't think I could have been able to. So at least I got to act the part a little bit. So that, and we'll see, it's going to be only aggravation from that. And it's interesting. It doesn't say he called him, but it's by Yosem Shmo, right? He places his name for him. Very interesting description as well.
He said the concubine gave him the name.
No, by Yosem, and he. It's in he. That's the male term.
Yeah.
It's the male term over there. One second. Okay. Also interesting, back in Pasuk Chavtes, why he is continued to be called Yerubbaal. They mention as well, just forgot to mention, that it's going to be in contradistinction to what happens after he's gone. In other words, he was Yerubbaal. He fought against the Baal. But in contradistinction, when he leaves, nobody's fighting against Yerubbaal, as we'll see very shortly. Okay, Pasuk Lamed Beis. Vayomas Gidon ben Yoash, and Gidon ben Yoash dies b'seiva tova, in a good old age. Vayikover bekever Yoash aviv ba'afra v'yezri, and he's buried in the burial grounds of his father Yoash, his father, in Afra in Avi Ezri. There's an interesting medrash that says a few people are mentioned. They died b'seva tova. Rish Lakish says 3 people. It says they died in a seva tova, in a good old age. Avram, David, and Gidon. So it says Avram, he was deserving to die in a good old age. David was deserving to die in a good old age. Gidon was not deserving to die in a good old age, because when he left a lot of stumbling blocks. Even though, again, he did everything for the sake of heaven, but it really caused stumbling blocks, and therefore, he died in a good old age, but really it wasn't a good old age.
Again, isn't that Hashem's choosing one?
It's not Hashem's choosing. Person makes their own free will choices.
Yeah, but the fact that he died at a ripe old age.
Okay, so listen, so he got that, he got the trapping, but it didn't really wasn't the real Seva Tova. It wasn't the real Seva Tova. It wasn't, when you die at a good old age and all your mitzvahs are with you and every day was a productive day, and so yeah, it's there to fool people. Some people say, well, you don't have to be righteous, you could have a Seva Tova, so that opens up free will choice for other people. Get a good old age even if you don't live up to your reputation. So that's what happened with him. Okay, now things start to turn in the other direction, and this is going to be like a little bit of an introduction to the next parak, the next 2 psukim. Vayhi kasher meis Gidon, it was when Gidon died, boom. Vayeshuva b'nei Yisrael, the Jews went back to their old ways. Vayiznu acharei ha'ba'alim, and they strayed after the idols. Vayasimu lahem Baal bris le'elohim, and they established for themselves, they made for themselves another Baal, another one of those idols, and he was called the Baal bris. And that's the name. That was the name of the Baal. It was the name of the idol. The idol of the master of the covenant. And they made it for a god. So they went right back to that. Lo zachru b'nei Yisrael es Hashem Elokeichem, and they did not remember. The Jewish people did not remember Hashem, their God. Hamatzil osam miyad kol oivei misaviv, who saved them from the hands of all the enemies around them. They forgot all about it. And Lamed Hey, v'lo osu chesed in beis Yerubal Gidon. They did not do kindness with the house of Yerubal, who's Gidon. According to all the good that he did for them. And we'll see in the next parak what the lack of that goodness was. Okay, there's a lot to talk about on this last point over here. So the commentaries here mention that again, and we're going to have to really get into this a little bit. Like, so how could all this happen? This again, it comes back to that point. Unbelievable miracles happened. Hashem does unbelievable miracles, and another 40 years, and it's like it didn't happen, and they totally revert back to the old ways. Right? So again, that needs a little discussion. And again, there's always little hints in the Navi, just like we said before, many moons ago in the second parak, when we said, how could the Jews have done all these sins? They're just the last generation who will conquer everybody. And the hints of the pasuk said, but the leaders didn't do their job, and that was just hinted to. Couldn't even see it clearly in the pasuk, but that's why everything was a problem. So somehow these last 2 psukim, he died, went back to their old ways, and they didn't remember. It seems a little bit extra words of what's going on. We're going to see, we'll dig in, we'll see that this is the source of where the problems come from. We'll see that in a second. Yes, Rafal?
I guess I was just wondering, he was still the shofet, even though he was kind of chilling out the last years of his life?
A chilled out shofet, yes.
So therefore
he was or he wasn't.
The people were leaderless in a way.
Sort of.
So in other words, it's not like this might have suggested he died and then everybody just all of a sudden started moving back into idol worship, but maybe that was happening in the absence of.
That's right. That's what we're going to say right now.
Okay.
Exactly, and that's why it doesn't say. Normally, it says, "Vayehi acharei mos." It was after the person dies. Here it says, and it was as he died. Usually it says, "Vayehi acharei," after. Yeah, it was good, mamish good, but after he died, then they were bad. Here it says, "Vayehi kasher meis." It was as he died, which seems to say that they were just waiting for him to die. And once he dies, now we're back into the idol worship. As opposed to Vayhi acharemos means to say they really were 100% good. And then the person died. And since that person died, now they weren't able to affect the people. And then as time progressed after that, then the people became bad. Here was, as he died, they did that. So it seems there was like 3 steps to the descent over here. It was a 3-step process. Number 1 is, even when the ephod was there, when Gidon was alive and the ephod was there, it already says they already strayed away. Even though Gidon did what he did L'Shem Shemayim, but people already were thinking that maybe, this isn't exactly, they weren't thinking totally for Hashem. They were thinking about their idols, but they didn't do anything. They were still doing it within the quote-unquote Jewish context of going to the Jewish ephod. Right? So it was first, Vayiznu Kol Yisrael Acharav Shom. They strayed after that ephod. But then it says, we just read now, Vayiznu Kol. It says Vayiznu Acharei HaBaalim. Now that was a pasuk Lamed Gimel. Now they stray after the Baal. So the Gemara says, no, not exactly, not 100%. Zoni means to stray, means thoughts of the heart. It means on their mind. They wanted to do it. They were already thinking longingly about the Baal. But how can we do it? Gidon's alive. So, but we really want to, but still Gidon's here. It'll be a chutzpah. It's like the people who really don't want to be religious, but their religious parents are still alive and they respect their parents. So how can I break their heart that I'm going to be Machal Shabbos and that? But as soon as my father kicks, then I'm going to do whatever I want to do. So that's what he's saying. That was going on over there. So Vayiznu Acharei HaBaalim. So you really want to think about doing it. But then there's one more step that has to happen, and that was in Pasuk Lamed Aleph. They didn't remember Hashem who saved them, and they did not do kindness with the family of Gidon according to everything that he had done for them. That becomes the 3rd step. So what does that mean? So the Yalkut Shimoni says something very illuminating here. In other words, there seems to be a connection in Pasuk Lamed Dalet to Lamed Hey. It says they did not remember Hashem who saved them, and they did not do kindness with the house of Gidon. And before we get into what the Parshio says, the Malbim picked up on that as well. What's going on over there? So the Malbim explains that they did not remember. They did not remember that what? That first of all, the salvation was miraculous, that it came through Hashem. So they should have remembered Hashem, the miracles Hashem did through Gidon. So they didn't remember Hashem because they figured as time passed, that's a natural thing. Maybe it's the strength of Gidon. So we don't have to remember Hashem. Okay, don't have to remember Hashem, but at least be nice to Gidon. At least be. What was it? Like, you were saved. Doesn't anybody get the credit? Well, should you thank Hashem? Well, thank Hashem. Gidon was a big soldier. He was a tremendous element of surprise. He was a genius. It was natural. I don't have to remember Hashem. Okay. So how about Gidon? So at least you should be kind to Gidon. And we'll see that they do very great injustices to Gidon. So now the Jews are hitting both sides. And that leads us now to this Yalkut Shimoni now. The Yalkut Shimoni says, on the words, and the Jews will not remember Hashem, the Yalkut asks, Lama, why? Why didn't they remember Hashem? So the next pasuk is the answer. In other words, how can you not remember Hashem, who saved them from the enemies? It's unbelievable. How could that be? Well, next pasuk's the answer. The what? Because they didn't do chesed to the house of Yerubal. And that's what the Medrash says, Oi! Anyone who does kindness, it's as if he admits and praises Hashem for all the miracles he did since the Jews left Egypt. Someone who does not do kindness, as if he denies all the miracles that Hashem ever did in the world. Let's get that idea clear. Anyone who does kindness is like a person who admits that Hashem has saved us all the time. You believe in Hashem. A person who does not do kindness really is a person who denies Hashem's involvement in the world. So how does that make sense? But that is the key. That is the key. That explains. How could it be that they forgot Hashem? Because they didn't do kindness to Gidon. So the explanation is, because we know it says in Tehillim, Olam Chesed Yibana, the world is built on kindness. The whole world from beginning to end is all a manifestation of God's kindness. The creation of the world is a kindness. The maintenance of the world is a kindness. Hashem giving us the Torah and understanding how to live in this world is a kindness. From the beginning to the end, the world is one total, complete kindness. So if a person would stop and think and recognize his place in the world, if he understood that his whole existence is based on Hashem's kindness to him, how do we know that? If a guy, I thank Hashem that He did all these things for me. That shows that you recognize this. And anybody who denies a kindness that happened, it's like he totally denies HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he brings down from Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel. He says, we have no idea what Hashem is. No way we can understand Hashem. But at least by the way He acts, we can understand Him. And how does He act? He acts with kindness. So if a person understands that, then a person can achieve, he can understand all the good of Hashem. And that was the whole idea with Avram. Avram looked around and he understood, where did this come from? Where does this come from? There must be a creator. Ooh, look how kind he was, he did this and that. Avram came to the understanding on his own that there was a creator who was very kind and did all these things. And he understood one last point. And the ultimate kindness is that Hashem wants to bestow that kindness upon us. And that happens by us connecting to Hashem, connecting to Him in the deepest way. And that is the ultimate kindness that can exist. But how can you connect to Hashem? You're so different than Hashem. What's the only way you can connect to Hashem is to be like Hashem. So how can you be like Hashem? Be kind. Like Hashem. Right? So that's why by Nabal, for example, who was a very wicked guy in Sefer Shmuel, but by him he didn't do kindness, so he wasn't called a bad, cruel guy. He was called the guy who said there is no God. Why? Because the more you believe that there is a God, that belief will manifest itself in you acting kindly to other people.
It has to be with the right kavanah.
Of course it has to be with the right kavanah.
Because there could be people...
All other kindnesses are not real kindnesses.
Yeah.
All the kindnesses are not real kindnesses. They're only self-interest kindnesses. We're talking about what the real kind of chesed, the way we've been explaining chesed all along, where you're doing it for the recipient's benefit, not for your benefit, but most importantly, I'm doing it so I can be imitato Dei. To be like Hashem. To do the kindness the way Hashem wants me to do the kindness, not the way I think I should be doing kindness. So that's critical. In other words, and so that's what the Medrash is saying. That when a person does an act of kindness that's complete, and you're doing it, why? Because you understand that Hashem is kind and wants to bestow His kindness upon me with a relationship with me, and the only way I can get that is by being kind. So that shows you recognize that there's a creator. So that's what the Medrash says. Anyone who does kindness, it shows you that he believes in the creator. And anyone who doesn't do kindness, he denies that there's a creator. Because let's say, well, why should you be kind? Why should a person be kind? Why should I give what I have to somebody else? Why? I have it, why should I give it to anybody else? There's only one reason. There's only one reason. Because God, this whole world is based on kindness. Everything Hashem does, everything you have is because of God's kindness. And ultimately what you can achieve is through God's kindness. And that will only happen if you can be godly and do the same type of kindness. Oh, so that's a kind person. So you imagine, the Jews, Hashem saved them and does miracles. See how kind He was to them? So the least they could say is, so I guess we should be kind. But once you forget Hashem, so why did they forget Hashem? Because they didn't even do kindness with Gidon. That's the biggest proof that they were forgetting Hashem. And that's what he says. With a Ma'aseh Chesed HaSholem, when a person does a complete, perfect act of kindness, it proves that he recognizes the goodness that Hashem does in the world. And to realize that my whole existence is only from Hashem's kindness. And that should force you, that should make it why you should be doing chesed. So why didn't they remember Hashem? Because they themselves didn't do kindness. That's the insight over here. When you feel you don't have to do kindness to other people, then you're automatically rejecting Hashem. The same way. So now you can understand, if you're cruel to other people, that means you don't feel you owe Hashem anything at all, and you totally deny Hashem.
Did they say what they did to the house of Gideon?
It's coming up.
Oh.
It's coming up.
Okay.
A question.
Yeah.
Did Gideon really teach them chesed?
Did he teach? Maybe not.
He met them.
He helped them. He helped them, but I don't know what. But not afterwards. Like after the battles, that was his thing. But
You know how much time was that he was like Vayeshev?
it could have been 40 years.
70 kids were.
It's a long time. They were riding the crest of the wave of this great victory. Remember, the enemies were now gone. Everything was fine. He established some type of worship of God, but it was not the typical way of worship of God. So it takes time till it manifests itself. It lasts as long as the charismatic leader is alive. The charismatic leader dies. The religion is not based on charismatic leaders. It's based on Hashem. Sometimes the less charismatic leader, the better, because then it's more focused on Hashem as opposed on Guido. Right?
Isn't it the effort that he did Gidon shows you that he did not teach them chesed?
Why?
Because you should have taken all this gold and said, this we will give to the poor, and we will help people in need.
That's a very good
and
point.
we will make a fund.
It's a very good point.
So instead of that, he's teaching them something to watch, award, the Olympic, we won. We came with a trophy.
That's right. That's what I once spoke about. The whole idea. The Gemara says that when the Chashmonaim, coming up to Hanukkah, the Chashmonaim retook the Beis Hamikdash, so there was no menorah. There's no menorah. So So the Gemara says, when they first got the menorah, they made it out of metal. They got a little richer. They made it out of silver. They got a little richer. They made it out of gold. So the question everybody asks is, what are you talking about? They just fought the Greeks. The Greeks were so sure they're going to win the battle against the Jews. They streamlined the slave industry, and they brought all the slave traders to the battlefield. Instead of having to schlep the slaves to the ports and sell it to the slave traders, we'll bring the slave traders to the battlefield, make a quick transaction. So all the slave traders brought tons of money. So when the Chashmonaim won the battle against the Greeks, there was tremendous amount of loot that they had. Tremendous amount of loot that they had. So what happened? They could afford a gold menorah. So one of my rabbis said, see, that's what happened. What happened? The Chashmonaim understood that the problem is the Greeks had subjugated the Jews so terribly. The Jews were impoverished. So what did the Chashmonaim do? The Chashmonaim understood the whole war against the Greeks was the whole war of chesed. Remember, the Jews represent chesed. The other people of the world represent the opposite of chesed. And the Greeks became the manifestation of the opposite of chesed. And that permeated into the Jewish culture. Jews weren't helping Jews. So when they won the war, the first thing the Chashmonaim did was they got all this money, give it to the poor. They did not even rebuild the Beis Hamikdash properly. They did not make a gold menorah, because you know what? A metal one's also kosher.
Right.
We don't have to have an expensive one, but we have to be kind. So you see that's what we celebrate in Hanukkah. That's why there is the custom on Hanukkah to give Hanukkah geld. You give money to the poor on Hanukkah because that's what the holiday's all about. You see, that got distorted, first with the gift giving. Now we give to people who don't need. Give to your kids. Your kids don't need any gifts. They're so spoiled and pampered. I give them another toy. No, you should be looking for poor people. The idea is poor, struggling Torah scholars who are having trouble. It's hard for them to continue to learn Torah because they don't have any money. You should support them. So you see, very good. So you see the difference. By the Chashmonaim, when they won their battle, they took all the money and they used it to help. Gidon, you're right. A very good point, Esther. They should have got all the money. As a matter of fact, they've been pillaged for years. The economy was reeling. Can you imagine 7 years of depression? 7 years, every year the enemy comes, takes all your food. They were reeling. So what should he have done with that? He should have certainly been taking all the money and giving it to them. But instead he looked for some kind of religious icon. At the end of the day, that's not what makes it for the Jewish people. So you're right. So he didn't really show the chesed. He didn't lead the way with chesed, and therefore they're not going to lead the way in chesed. So therefore what comes around goes around, and therefore you'll see the unkindness that happens to Gidon ultimately. While he was just happy to have a big family and everything's fine with me. It didn't end up good. Okay.